I just said, hey, it's if not now, then when? And just took the leap and made it happen. And I'm so happy I did. My business is 3 times the size what it was in Minneapolis in just a few years' time. So I think if you're waiting for the right time or for something to give you permission, you're never going to find it, and you just need to do it.
Welcome to another episode of The Financially Free Investor, where you will learn information and strategies on how to become financially independent by investing in real estate, something that is not taught openly in our society today. Financial freedom matters so you can live a bigger life, retire early, and do what matters most to you. Get ready to hear tried and true methods to becoming financially free with your host, Jordy Clark.
All right, everyone, welcome into another episode of The Financially Free Investor. I have an acquaintance that I met through GoBundance. His name is Jordan Moorhead. So we got Jordy and Jordan for you today. He is based out of Austin, Texas, and he's got a really unique story. I think it's probably going to line up similar to mine. So I'm excited to hear more about it and everything you guys have going on. So I just want to jump in. How you doing, Jordan?
Good, Jordy. How about yourself?
Dude, great. I'm doing great.
Thanks for having me on. Weather looks nice where you are.
Absolutely. What was that?
So the weather looks really nice there where you are.
Oh yeah, it's like 28 degrees. We got snow on the ground.
Sunny.
It's sunny. We got great snow this year. Like I know the GoBundance event in Park City was last year, but should have been this year because the snow is unreal.
Well, we're going to Tahoe here in a couple of weeks, and it sounds like the snow's not bad there, so we should make out all right.
Yeah, it should be a good time. Cool. Well, let's jump in, man. How'd you get started on your journey to financial freedom?
Probably how a lot of people get started, and I personally think it's the best way to get started. I started house hacking. And I lived in a duplex. So I like how Craig Kurlop talks about the comfortability scale. He took it a little further than I took it, but I lived in a room of a 3-bedroom apartment in the duplex that I owned. And I rented out all the other rooms, and I rented out the unit upstairs. And I actually made money to live in my first house hack. And then I just kept house hacking after that. But while in my first house hack, I was able to save so much money that I bought my first rental property 6 months later.
Wow. How long ago was this?
This was started in 2016 was my first house hack.
Okay.
And I bought my first rental property early 2017.
Where did you stumble on the idea of house hacking and maybe explain that a little bit deeper? You kind of already did, but
for me, it wasn't so much that I stumbled on the idea as much as like I understood the basics of buying a home and paying off your mortgage. And when I was so my business partner now and I have known each other since the 4th grade, but I remember sitting either outside of his house or somewhere around his house and talking to him and saying, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could buy properties that somebody else would pay down the mortgage? Eventually we would have these properties that somebody else paid for. And we understood the basics that, hey, if somebody else is paying it, in the long run, you're going to be in good shape. But with house hacking, after I understood those basics, I said, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I bought a duplex and maybe I lived upstairs and the person downstairs paid a lot of the mortgage? That was all I knew. Then I found bigger pockets and started to realize that, wow, maybe I could even live for free while I did this.
Yeah. Cool. So you buy your first duplex. Do you remember how much you paid for it and then what your mortgage was and what the rents were?
Yeah, I do. So it was, I paid $182,000 for it. The mortgage was low 12s, like maybe 1250, max 1250. The rent from the other unit was $1,300. So the rent from the other unit right there covered the mortgage. And then all of my bills were then covered by my roommate, who I didn't charge enough. I only charged him $450. We had an arrangement. He was supposed to do my accounting. He never did my accounting. He got a good deal on a room. And then the other room was just pure profit.
Okay. How much did you rent that one out for?
It was a smaller room, so it was $400 to $500 a month.
Okay.
It was an Airbnb, so it wasn't like a constant, but it was a tiny little room. It actually was a porch. It wasn't a bedroom.
Okay.
And we rented out the porch on Airbnb for an average of $15 a night.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that experience having an Airbnb in the same unit that you're living in?
Dude, really cool, actually. So we learned the hard way that we didn't want short-term stays. So after a few short-term stays and getting awful reviews from people who expected a nice place for $15 a night, we just changed it to 10-day plus stays. Nobody local allowed is essentially what we said. So we would get exchange students, people coming to town for longer term jobs, people who just needed to stay in the area for a long time. And they were really cool people. We had a guy from Vietnam, his wife and daughter came and visited while he was there. So this guy, his wife and his daughter stayed in the porch. It almost wasn't as wide as a full bed. So there was a full bed and there was enough room for a nightstand next to it. Obviously TV, like a wardrobe, that kind of stuff. We had a guy from Germany who was hilarious. We had a guy who was a video producer for a local rap group. We had a lot of really cool people when we changed to 10-day plus. Those 2-night stays just weren't for us.
Cool. So how long did you live in that duplex? I mean, I know you said you bought a rental 6 months later.
Yep. I lived in it for about a year and a half. Then I was in the process of moving to Austin. That was actually in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay.
I was in the process of moving to Austin. So I moved out, moved in with a buddy. Thought I was going to hold on to that duplex as a rental, but then realized that I didn't want to own one property in Minneapolis. And I also found a building on the same street that my first rental property was on. So I sold that and bought 2 buildings on the same street my first rental was on.
Was that in Minneapolis too, or was that?
No, it was in Louisville, Kentucky. So I'm from Louisville. I moved up to Minneapolis in college, stayed there for almost 10 years, but I've done most of my investing in Louisville, Kentucky, actually.
So where'd you go from there?
Moved down to Austin. So first duplex. By the time I left Minneapolis, I had 3 sixplexes down in Louisville. Moved to Austin, bought a single family with an ADU, because when I was trying to buy it, I didn't have an FHA loan available, but I could buy something with a conventional loan. I didn't know Austin well enough, and I wasn't looking to have roommates at the time. So bought a single family with ADU, sold the first duplex in Minneapolis. Of course, before that, bought the next. So I had 3 sixplexes and 1 2-unit in Austin. I didn't stay in that for more than about a year and bought another one here in Austin.
Okay. Why'd you move to Austin?
I'm not a huge fan of the cold. Like the 20, you talk about 28 degrees, like, and that probably sounds cold to a lot of people. We were in Minneapolis in my girlfriend's house the winter before I moved to Austin, and her furnace went out when it was -50 outside.
Yeah.
So we just said, okay, I'd already been thinking about moving back to Austin. I lived in Austin before I bought my first rental property in 2016. And my first house hack, and really liked it, but just didn't have my life together at the time. And I'd always said, oh, I kind of want to move back there. When the -50 came around, I said, I've had enough.
Yeah. The -50s, I mean, anything, once you get into the, like 28 isn't terrible, right?
No.
But you start getting into the single digits and negative. Like I was up in Montana back in December, and it was like -15 and the wind chill was like -32.
Yeah.
And like, that's when it starts getting like that's dangerous, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I can appreciate going, hey, even if Austin gets down to 50 degrees, that's the 100-degree swing.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the soundbite of why we moved to Austin. But in reality, like, I could have moved anywhere. I didn't move to Austin just because it was warm. Like if I wanted just warm, I could go to Nashville, which is really close to my family in Louisville, or I could have gone to Tampa or South Carolina, Charleston. But I moved to Austin. I was trying out all these places back in 2015. Went to Tampa, went to Charleston, obviously went back to Louisville, went to Nashville, went to all the hot spots that people are moving to. But when I came to Austin, it almost immediately I said, this is where I want to be. You know, it had such the energy. And just as I got to know more people here and got to know more about the business happenings here, it was a really clear choice for me.
You know, just side note, I really commend you for that, because I think most people don't put thought and energy into a lot of stuff in life. Instead, like they just maybe follow this prescribed path, right? Where what I really admire about your story so far is you took time. I'm assuming you didn't have any kids at the time.
Nope.
You took time before you really had to get tied down, quote unquote, or establish roots, or however someone wants to phrase it, and checked out a bunch of these cities and kind of just figured out, you know, what made sense for you versus, you know, so often I think people, and this is just me outside looking in on other people's lives, no judgment, but like they go to school, they get a certain job because they think that's what success means. Then they stay in that job, even though they may hate it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever. And then, you know, they have this classic retirement where they think it's going to be great. Anyways, like, I just commend you for like stepping outside of the norm, because I think most people don't take a step back to do what you did.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think for me, I've always had this sense of urgency. It's always, if not now, then when. So I had two businesses in Minneapolis. I had a huge network. I was making a lot of money for the time. I was like, wow, I'm crushing it. And it would have been really easy to say, you know, I'm doing really, really well here. I have this, my first business, which was a personal training business that almost ran without me. And then my realtor business that obviously took a lot more of my attention. They're doing really well. Why would I give that up? But I just said, hey, I know I don't want to be here long term. There is not going to be a time when I feel good about it. You know, like I know it's going to be hard. I know I'm going to move and know almost nobody. Obviously knew some people. Joining GoBundance helped a lot. There's a ton of people in town. I'd made connections here, but I knew I wasn't going to have the connections that I did in Minneapolis, where anything I needed was a phone call away. I do now here, but years later. And I just said, hey, it's if not now, then when? And just took the leap and made it happen. And I'm so happy I did. My business is 3 times the size what it was in Minneapolis in just a few years' time. So I think if you're waiting for the right time or for something to give you permission, you're never going to find it, and you just need to do it.
Dude, I mean, we could end the podcast right there. That's gold.
It's just there's never, you never have as much time as you think you do.
Yeah.
You just never know. When I moved to Austin, the second day I was in Austin, I got hit by a car and almost died on my motorcycle. So I moved to Austin in October of 2018, got hit by a car, spent a week in intensive care, spent another month in a rehab facility, spent months after that learning to walk and like getting back on 2 feet. I think it's the best way to put it. I ended up back in Minneapolis for another year after that because I didn't have any like support system down here at all. My girlfriend's whole family's in Minneapolis. I have some family in Minneapolis. It was just way easier. But like it would have been really easy at that time to say like, hey, the universe is telling you to stay here, stay put. And I just knew I wasn't going to be happy if I did that.
Man, that's crazy. So after that, what did your life look like after you got back up on your 2 feet, physically and emotionally, and I'm sure everything?
I think that while it was like a huge experience, and I guess a traumatic experience that you could call it, it slowed me down for a few months, but that was about it. I couldn't walk. I was in really bad shape for a couple months there, but even big KW is such an amazing community. Like so many people from Keller Williams reached out to help me. My broker took care of all my transactions that I had going at the time. I remember I was like giving them details from the hospital bed for certain transactions I had. Of course, business slowed down a little bit there because I wasn't putting my any energy out into the world or prospecting, but it wasn't. I was rookie of the year in 2018. I was top 5 agents in the brokerage in 2019. Coming off of that wreck, like I was this close to being rookie of the region in 2018, and I think I would have if I wouldn't have gotten hit by that car. But you never know. I was
Yeah.
runner up. It really didn't slow me down too much, man. I just kept the mentality that I'm just going to keep moving forward and doing whatever I have to do to get better.
Yeah.
And I got better really quickly.
Yeah. It's interesting just thinking about that mentality and the choice you made. I think too often in our society, people take the opposite approach where, you could have taken a victim mentality and you could have been like, oh, poor pity me. And, the universe is saying no, but you were just like, how you chose to frame it, I think is awesome. And it's why you're successful, in my opinion.
I wouldn't do it again if I could avoid it.
Sure.
But I don't look back on it with any sort of ill will or bad feelings. I don't feel badly towards the person that caused me to get in that wreck. It was clearly her fault, but I'm sure she didn't mean to do it. Like who wants to get in a horrible car wreck and go through a months long lawsuit to try to resolve it? Like it's just nobody wants to do that. She didn't mean to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's jump back into your real estate journey. You're in Austin. You're starting to sell real estate again. Are you continuing buying Louisville or?
Yeah, so
buying in Austin?
I bought 14 units in 2018. 2019, I didn't do anything. So the one thing the wreck did slow down a lot was that, because obviously had moved to Austin, ended up back in Minneapolis just out of nowhere. And it kind of put a pause on my real estate investing business. My real estate sales business continued to do really well, and I just really focused on that. In 2020, I really hit the ground running again. I bought another duplex here. I started passive investing, so investing in other people's deals, so syndications, apartment syndications to be specific. And then I got into my first partnership towards the end of 2020, and that's really where things took off. I'd done really well on my own. I owned 20 some odd units on like just me, and I'd made 5 or so passive investments, but I didn't have a system. I didn't have processes. I didn't have a business partner to help speed things up. We started buying single family houses in Louisville, Kentucky. In December of 2020, we bought 7. We bought a package to get started. And then in the next year, we bought, I think 15 Burr properties. So we bought them, we rehabbed them, we refinanced them, built a bunch of equity. And now we're up to 35 single family houses between Louisville, and we have a single one in San Antonio.
Okay. With you and your partner, right?
Yeah, the houses are all my partner and I. I've never, before we bought those houses, and to this day, I've never bought a house for myself, investing or otherwise. And we just kept buying those at scale, and we got really good. We have a really small box. We will buy this specific type of house in this specific area, and it makes it really easy to say yes, at the same time that it makes it really easy to say no.
That's important, because I think so many people, they want to get financially free, or they want to leave their job or do whatever. And so it's like you just start saying yes to everything. And then,
Yeah.
before you know it, I know people who have like, a car wash and then a mobile home park and
Mm.
3 duplexes and a single family house. And, those are all in different markets. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, what are you building? So I think it's great that you have your very small buy box and you know what you're buying and, you can say yes or no to it.
And it makes it super easy to stay focused with other things. So I can focus 100% on my real estate business. If I see a deal come through from a wholesaler or a realtor or whatever else, and it hits our buy box, we just say yes or no. There's no thought that's put into it. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to analyze the deal. I don't have to have somebody go over and look at it. I know if it's this specific deal and it's this specific area, I can put it under contract at this price. I can send our property manager with our contractor over the next day to do a walkthrough with our real estate agent, or just by themselves if it's a wholesale. And that's all we have to do. So it takes such little energy and thought that it makes buying real estate really, really easy. Where, like you're saying, if you're buying a car wash, a mobile home park, and a 12-unit apartment building, and all these different deals, you have to get so deep in it and figuring out if it's the right deal for you, and knowing all about it. And if you just already know all about it, you just say yes or no.
Yeah. Great advice. Why do you like that market versus Austin?
Definitely the price of entry. So for cash flowing real estate, Austin is challenging. Really, the things that we see work really well here are short-term rental and medium-term rental, but those are different businesses, and the regulations here in Austin are challenging with short-term rental. Medium-term rental is really easy, and we could talk about that later. But in Louisville, like I was saying, we know our area, we know our buy box, we have the system, we have the processes. I grew up there. My father's still a realtor there. My business partner runs an insurance business in town. Our property manager is a buddy I went to high schools with dad, and he owns way more properties than we do in the area. Like, it's just easy. I didn't go looking for anything. It was just what I knew.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I'm curious, like how well do those cash flow? Because
We end up close to a 10 cap on all of them. So they don't cash flow great. I think people get the BRRRR sounds really, really good because it's like, oh, I can either put my money in and get my money back, or I can use somebody else's money and just pay them all back, which is what we do most of the time. And we've learned over the couple of years of doing this that, like I have known forever and learned at so many multifamily conferences and been told by so many people, if a water heater goes out, there's your cash flow for a couple months. If the furnace goes, there's your cash flow for the year. If you need a new roof, there's your cash flow for 2 years. Like, it's so easy for something to go wrong, even when you account for problems. Like, it's a simple problem that just happened, and this is partly on us, but partly just owning single family property. We went to turn a unit. It was $9,000 for the turn. That being partly on us. We didn't get 3 bids before we had the person do it, and we should have watched these expenses closer. But let's even say it was 4,000, 3,000, which it probably should have been that or less. That's the cash flow for like a year or two, if things go decent.
yeah,
And there's just there's no scale to it. Even like I said, when you're accounting for expenses, it's a great way to build equity. And that's exactly what we've done. We built a ton of equity these last couple of years, but we're about to start repositioning that equity into something that cash flows better.
I'm just going to ask the obvious question. What are you going to reposition that equity into?
Sure. So one of two things. I did the small multifamily, like the 20 unit type deals. I had 18 units in a Class C area. It's definitely not going to be that. I learned the hard way that that's just not for me. And you run into a lot of the same issues, like the maintenance costs and the turnover kills your cash flow. So our number one focus is going to be mobile home parks here in the next couple of years. I've taken mobile home park boot camps from Frank Rolfe. I know a lot of people that own mobile home parks. I know it enough to talk the lingo and get started. And we're building a system to find those, because like any deals, the best deals are not the easiest to find. And we want to just continue to buy. We want to buy as many of those as we can. If we get to the point that that's just not happening, and I don't think that's possible, but of course there's always there's always a possibility that happens. We're just going to put a lot of this equity in Class A shares in somebody's syndication, you know, get paid 10% and not do anything.
Yeah.
So it's really an either or, with the mobile home park being the number one priority and that kind of being a backup.
Yeah.
But we will continue to buy single family houses. This didn't occur to me that it was something that I could sell, but also continue to do, because it's made so much equity for us. But I was talking with David Green at a conference, a KW conference, and I was telling him my woes, because I know he's had a bunch of single family houses. He's like, yeah, you could 1031, or you could cash out and you could do that again. And I said, oh, I could do it again. You know, like, it's not that I have to get out of it and be done with it.
Yeah.
But it's been so good for building equity. Like, I could go just repeat, and that's what we're going to do. We're still trying to buy now. We've had trouble buying the last couple months because it seems like expectations are so much higher right now.
Yeah.
We haven't had a deal in the last 3 months.
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting you say that, because I've kind of had that thought bouncing around in my head lately, you know, like, I think there's this myth out there that, you know, you're going to reach some point in the future where all you're going to do is sit on the beach, and, you know, like, you just do nothing else. Right. And because you own so much real estate, and, you know, I think that might work for a period, but like you said, stuff always breaks. And like, you have to be active in real estate, unless you're a passive investor. I've definitely invested in some investments as an LP, and that check is probably the closest to passive that I would call, you know, investing in real estate passive, because I don't really have to have any brain damage of tenants and toilets and termites and hurricanes and roofs and water.
Yeah. But that's just so boring, and there's not as much leverage in that either. And I do invest passively, and I really enjoy it. But it's just like, hey man, at some point I could not do anything all day. I just know myself. I can take a few days off and then I get bored. I can even take a few hours not doing anything and I get bored. Like, and with this system we have going, we have such a good system set up that it's not a lot of work to do this. So it just doesn't make sense to not keep doing it. And maybe we don't keep them as long. Maybe they're like a year, and take that longer term capital gains tax and sell them. You know, doesn't mean we have to build up a big rental portfolio and hold on to it forever. But just 3 of these houses are going to provide a sizable down payment for our first mobile home park deal. So it's like you're doing this diet, and it's working so well that you switch to a different diet. It's like, why did you stop doing what worked? And this works for us. So it'd be almost just downright stupid to not even figure out a way to keep doing it. And maybe we hire somebody to do a lot of the legwork, the running around. I know my business partner, being in town, he's in the car a lot, running over, but because we have it in one specific area, he's only going 15 minutes away. He's not going zigzagging all around town. It's like, hey, here's this neighborhood you're going to.
Yeah. That's important with single family rentals, because you can, like, even buying in the same market, you can get stretched out to where, you know, you're driving an hour over to this house and then an hour over to that house. And, you know, Austin's that way, right? You're like, my buddy Mike Kiola is like, he moved there and he's like, dude, I'm 30 minutes from everything.
Yeah.
And I'm 30 minutes from any.
Yeah, everything's 30 minutes away here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even so, 2 of the 3 we're selling are outside of that specific neighborhood only by like a mile or 2. And that's part of the reason we're selling them, because it's like, hey, they're not just in this little cluster. And then we're going to sell this one in San Antonio because it's just completely out on its own. We haven't found the deals we want in San Antonio because of property taxes. So we're just going to cut it loose. We might flip a few there in the future, but I don't think we'll be buying rentals there unless we find really good deals.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's really cool, and I think it's going to be cool to watch your journey as you start picking up some of these mobile home parks and converting this equity into maybe something that yields a little bit more cash flow and just keep building equity. I think that's probably the coolest thing about Burr and even just real estate investing in general is like you can make these small pivots and still keep investing, but just do what you like. And like you don't have to do every deal in Louisville to be
Sure.
a success. And let's talk about your team for a couple minutes, just out of my genuine curiosity.
Sure.
You guys are in the Austin area. Yeah, what does your team look like, and how are you helping people? What's your focus?
Yeah. So I think because of my love for real estate investing, my focus of myself had always been helping newer investors get started investing. And it just happened to be mostly newer investors because it feels like the more seasoned investors already had their agents or already had their connections or their systems. So we really helped mostly newer house hackers for the entire time I've been in the real estate agents business. And my agents, 2 out of 3 of them were past clients. So they were house hacking clients. And because they're house hacking clients, they're now on the team as agents. My admin worked in property management and real estate sales on another team a while back, and she's getting into the investing side of things. So really where we focus, our ideal client is somebody looking to house hack in Austin, because we know that really, really well. We also work with investors. That doesn't end up being as many because, like I was talking about, property taxes and property prices are expensive here in Austin. We also work with flippers. We work with the occasional home buyer, but the focus and the ideal client is, of course, the house hacker in Austin. We're really good at that. We know that front and back. We know it better than anybody else. We have meetups around that stuff. We have a client mastermind group where we talk about goal setting and how to stay on track and just meet and have that nice ecosphere where we're always talking about that stuff. We've got YouTube channels. We have Austin real estate investing podcasts, but it's all around real estate investing in Austin with a heavy focus on house hacking. So 4 agents and an admin right now. The goal is to double the agent count this year. So we'll double the agents other than me. So get up to 6 agents, myself, and 2 admin this year.
Cool. What's the market doing in Austin? I mean, we're recording this January of 2023. Interest rates are 6 to 7%, which is double what it was a year ago. I'm curious, what's Austin doing price wise, inventory wise? What's going on?
I'll get into that real quick, but before I make any like what feel like predictions, I had a podcast with Jeremy Knight. He's like the YouTube realtor. He's all over the place. If you look him up, Knight, like Knight with the sword. We had a podcast where we made all these predictions. This is when rates were back in the 5s, earlier 2022. And we said, all right, rates aren't going up anymore. Prices aren't going to change anymore. We're kind of there. I think we're going back the other way. We were wrong on everything. But the stats right now, the December 2022 stats just came out. So prices year over year in Austin, meaning December versus December, are down about 3%. They're down 3%. The prices June versus now are down closer to 15% off the peak. I think that's for a couple things. Everybody's head goes straight to rates. That's not the biggest thing I believe here in Austin. Our property taxes on average went up 56% in 2022. So 21 to 22, property taxes went up 56%. So that's going to make just as much of a dent on your payment as rates. It didn't go up 56% for everybody. For owner occupants that have a homestead exemption, obviously those can't be raised more than a certain amount, and you get an exemption on the taxable amount. So those properties are good. But all these rental properties, these people's taxes went to the moon in 1 year. Like 60% increase is outrageous. If you had a $6,000 property tax bill, it might be 10 the next year. So now that's causing rental properties to not be as attractive, but we're still seeing the prices fall the fastest on single family homes for the same reasons. Like if you had a single family home that didn't have a homestead exemption, like the home that I'm buying, we're buying probably the cheapest house in Austin, first house I'm going to buy for me, $355,000. The property tax bill is $10,000 on it. So like the 6% interest rate doesn't hurt you near as badly if you're in a city with a 1% tax rate versus a 2.5% tax rate like we've got here, in these massive tax jumps we've had.
You know, what's interesting about that is, I mean, so Utah, we've got a flat state income tax of 5%. So as a result, our property taxes are nowhere near what Austin's are. Right? Like they're really reasonable actually. So like my house, we just bought it and we paid $1.5 million, and my property taxes are $4,200 a year.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So for us, it's the interest rates that's really killing us, because like had I bought that house now versus when we bought it almost a year ago, you know, I'd be 3% higher on my rate. And I mean, I'd be paying $30,000 more per year on my payment.
Yeah.
So what is that? That's like $3,000 a month, right? So for us, the interest rates make a bigger dent than property taxes, but you guys kind of are getting a double whammy. Here's the interesting thing though, and just like comparing markets, is so we're down like year over year. In December, we're flat. So December 21 to 22, we were flat. We probably peaked in April of this year, and we are down from April. We're down about 18%, but anecdotally, I think it's a little bit more just based on, like, I bought a flip 460 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Learned a lot, by the way.
Yeah, that must have gone wrong.
I paid $620 for it. We put 150 into it. In March, I was like, if we can get this thing across the finish line, like I'm going to list for $1 million and this is going to be great. Like I'm going to cash a 6-figure check. Well, as quick as I had that thought, it's come back down. We just listed it yesterday for $899. And you know, like, again, it just, it is what it is. I'll probably lose a few bucks on it, but I'm looking at like new construction here, and condos that we're selling for 400, 420, they're now selling for 315, which is, you know, like 22, 23% down. So and it's just interesting, like even some of the townhouses in March, right by where we bought, people were bidding them up to like almost 600 grand, and now they're selling for 420. Just because, like, I don't know what it is, buyer demand, interest rates, our inventory is still relatively low.
Yeah.
But
ours actually went down from October to now.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I mean, here it makes sense because I've always said, you know, I mean, I've been an agent for almost a decade now. Whenever snow is on the ground here in Utah, buyer demand is gone. because no one wants to move, I mean,
Yeah.
you know how it is in Minnesota when it's 20 degrees outside and snowing. Nobody wants to lift their couch, up into a U-Haul and maybe moving it around, so we see seasonality more than anything, but I mean, it's been interesting just watching the market.
Did you have seasonality these last 2 years though? I'm curious.
So I will say the winters that are super mild, we have less seasonality. The really tough winters, we have more seasonality.
Okay. Because we have the same thing here, but the last 2 years it felt like there was no slowdown. Nobody cared. It could be Christmas Day in 2020 and somebody wanted to see a house. Now it feels like we're back to seasonality again.
Hmm. That's interesting. How is Louisville done?
They're down a little bit, but I think there's really a tale of two markets where it's not necessarily down so much as there's just not as much demand and things aren't as crazy. We keep making what's a good bid for us, and somebody's blown us out of the water with their bid on properties, but the prices are so much lower there that 6% interest rate on a $200,000 house doesn't hurt as bad as a 6% interest rate on a $600,000 house. It's slowed, but it hasn't slowed as much. Minneapolis is the same way. They're so much more affordable that it's slowed a little bit. The competition has slowed, but it's not as noticeable. So I actually still I list properties in Minneapolis, St. Paul still. I've got a good team member there who's not technically on my team, but he acts just the same. And we co-broker everything. And we're getting things sold quickly in Minneapolis at high prices. And it's just completely different here in Austin. We're still selling stuff at list price when it's priced right and it looks great.
Yeah.
But if it's not, it feels like it just sits forever.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what this year brings, 2023. Obviously the good news is if we see a decrease in valuations, you can go and contest property taxes, right? And get those properties down. Which you haven't been able to do, at least here in Utah, for the last 6 or 7 years, because the assessor would basically be like, these aren't comps, like this, no, we're still under market value. Yeah. So moving forward, you're going to grow the team, you're going to just modify some investments, or just realize some gains, keep doing what you've done, and then roll that into something that is maybe a little easier to manage. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And I've always just liked mobile home parks because it's the value add strategy is so easy. It's not that you have to make tons of repairs, tons of heavy lifting like you do with apartment buildings, but that you can clean up the area and you can bring in new homes, or you can remodel the homes that are there. It just feels relatively simple. The strategy to me, it's something I can easily get my head around. Obviously the valuation is driven by income, but a lot of times the rents are really low on these places and they just need the rents raised and the park cleaned up. So I love affordable housing. I like providing good housing for people. Our houses are nice. We have granite in a lot of these houses that are in Class C areas. And we really like just providing a nice product. We do it at a reasonable cost. We provide a great product for people. I'm not somebody that thinks the real estate market is just going in the tubes necessarily, but I'm also the same person that will be all right if it does. My expenses are really, really low. We live extremely frugally. Like we're buying, like I said, one of the cheapest houses in a decent area that you could buy in Austin, and we're going to fix it up and make it nicer and add some value too, because why would you buy something you couldn't? But I think personally, and I want to re-listen to this in 6 months, personally, I think the majority of the correction is behind us in the prices, from the interest rates shooting up, from the taxes shooting up, from the initial uncertainty and fear just coming on like crazy, unless something gets horrendously bad, I don't think prices are going to go down too much more.
Yeah. Will be interesting to see what happens and maybe reconnect in 6 months or 12 months and just see
Yeah,
where things are at, right? And
I could be completely wrong.
yeah, right.
I'm definitely wrong on some things, maybe
Yeah.
not on all of them.
The cool thing is, like, I think a lot of people might take that as, well, I don't know, so I'm just not going to invest, right? But instead, I think maybe people need to take the approach that you're taking. It's like, like nothing's going to be perfect, and I'd rather be in the ocean, making money, making equity, doing it in a smart way, versus, like, I think too many people rush into real estate as a get rich quick scheme, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and it was for the last couple of years.
Oh, well, yeah.
Like that wasn't wrong.
Well, but so much of everything was a get rich quick scheme.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
exactly.
A JPEG of a monkey was selling for millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like, that should have been a sign.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff has no basis in reality. Like, hey, I'm going to go buy real estate in the virtual world. Like, I mean, I don't sleep under my Bitcoin at night.
Well, and I think the whole thing, I mean, I always thought it was crazy. I learned real estate investing from people who were value-add real estate investors. And I always thought it was crazy watching these people buying houses in Austin and saying, I'm going to buy this here and it's going to appreciate so much over the next few years. I'm like, yeah, that's working today, but your car that you bought 3 days ago is also worth more now than it was before you started driving it around. And that makes no sense to me. When you pull the car off the lot, it loses 30% of the value right away.
Yeah.
It doesn't work unless you've got some really specific brand, of course, but it just doesn't work that you buy real estate and just because you bought it, the value shoots up. That should tell you that something's not normal. And that, I mean, I just don't think that's a good strategy. I'm a value add real estate investor.
Yeah.
I enjoy making things nicer and creating value. It couldn't last forever. And now we just got to go back to the fundamentals. And yeah, it's harder, but it can work.
Yeah. Well, I want to be sensitive to your time. I know we're kind of pushing up on the hour that we had booked. So let's maybe wrap it up and put a bow on these two questions. First, what's one thing you would want to tell someone who's working towards financial freedom?
Number one, get your expenses under control, because investing doesn't matter if you don't have that under control. Like you for one, you're not going to be able to invest, but in the off circumstance that you can, you're probably going to get caught in a bad situation if you don't have your expenses under control, and you're not going to continue to keep investing at the rate you need to get financially free.
So good. The last question, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently on your journey?
I would have started earlier. I started having the thoughts and the ideas and talking to lenders a few years before I started, and I was able to. So I could have started 2 or 3 years earlier, and I would have been more aggressive. Some of the biggest regrets I have are just the deals that were this close to meeting my criteria that I didn't buy. And some of them, there's good reasons I didn't buy, but a lot of them, it was just because they were a percent or two below my ROI that I wanted, but they were in the right areas and they were the right deals and they were the things that would have been easy for me to manage. I regret the deals I didn't buy.
So good. Well, Jordan, where can people find out more about you? If they're looking to house hack in Austin, how can they get in touch with you and your team?
I think the easiest way to get in touch with me is just on Instagram at Jordan_Moorhead, and Moorhead is Moorhead, no E after the R. But that's the best way to reach out to me. I'll point you in the right direction. We've got all our links on there too. So Austin Real Estate Investing Podcast and at Jordan_Moorhead. Perfect.
Well, if we have any referrals for Austin, we'll certainly be shooting them over to you guys, and
yeah,
you take great care of them. And Yeah, it's been fun chatting, and hopefully we'll see each other at a Go Bedman's event soon.
Absolutely. Are you going to Tahoe?
I'm not going to Tahoe,
Not
no.
going to Tahoe. Bummer,
Yeah.
man.
I was on the fence and then it sold out. So I was like, and then that same weekend we got invited to go on a trip with a few of our other friends down to Las Vegas.
Cool.
So I was gonna try to scoop up a ticket, but then we got invited and I was like, well, I'll make it to another GoBundance event.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's important to do stuff with other people other than just go to, events like that. And they're great. They're absolutely worth the time and money, but sometimes it's good to spend time with friends and family too.
Yeah, for sure. Gotta have a balance in everything, right?
Yeah, man. Gotta try.
Yeah. Cool. Well, with that, man, we'll sign off. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Thanks for having me, Jordy.
Yeah, we'll see ya.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Financially Free Investor. If you found value in this episode or know someone who would find value in this information, please share with them, subscribe, and send us a review.